Week 3 is here, and Tanner's going to break down everything you need to know. We've got our free bet of the week, stock up, stock down, DraftKings Player of the Slate, and a Primetime Preview with a prop that you are not going to want to miss. Let's jump in.
The time is now for the DraftKings Prop Sports Podcast. I am Tanner. I am our head of analytics, and I am in my 9th year working alongside Bob to originate our NFL and college basketball bets. And today, as always, I'm joined by our digital media specialist, Grant. Crazy start to Survivor pools this year.
Yeah, it's been insane. I saw GillAlexander posted that Circa Survivor has a record low number of entries eliminated, and just looking at the percentage compared to last year is insane.
Yeah, and Jay on our website has been writing a Survivor Pool series each week using the Circa Survivor rules, so you can find that at drbobsports.com, and Bob has also been posting that to Twitter.
All right, let's jump into our first segment here, which is the free bet of the week. And last week, you won on Seattle at +3, putting you at 23, 12, and 1 on podcast sides and totals dating back to 2023.
Yeah, but we took a bad number there, which is rare. Our bets beat the closing line 75% of the time, but someone was absolutely hammering the Steelers on Sunday like they knew the final score. It takes a lot to move an NFL side on game day from -3 to -4.
Well, ultimately, Seattle controlled the game, averaging 6.2 yards per play compared to Pittsburgh's 4.5 yards per play, and they won by 2 touchdowns. But where do you want to go this week with your bet?
This week, we're going to take Houston +1 over Jacksonville. You might be able to find a 1.5 there. We just released this side as a strong opinion to clients about an hour before we're recording, so I'm not really sure where the market has settled, but I would definitely take any Houston price as long as they're an underdog, because, you know, this game would have been priced at Texans -2 in the preseason, and handicap really comes down to how much do you want to believe in Jacksonville or downgrade Houston. So the Texans obviously 0-2 here, but they're +0.1 in net yards per play against the schedule that's 2 points more difficult than average. That's the 7th hardest schedule thus far, according to our metrics. Meanwhile, the Jaguars have been impressive. They're +1.0 net yards per play, but they've played a schedule 4.5 points easier than average.
Yeah, and the Jags rank 3rd in EPA per rush, and the offensive line ranks 3rd in pass blocking efficiency. But do you really believe in this offensive line?
I think that's really where the value is coming from this bet, because I think the Jaguars' offensive line is overrated just based off of the teams they've played thus far. They've gone against 2 bottom 10 defensive lines in my priors, and we talked about way back at the beginning of August how Jacksonville does not have talent on the offensive line, and they would be exploited by the league's best defensive lines. Houston has one of the best in the NFL. They ranked 3rd in sack rate last year, and they already ranked 4th in pressure rate this season. So our model thinks this game should be priced at about pick, but Houston applies to a 99, 36, and 2 against the spread early season bounce back situation, and the Jaguars apply to a 49, 119, and 5 against the spread situation. So it's one of Bob's strongest technical analysis plays of the week, and I think Houston should be favored here by 1.5.
Yeah, I couldn't believe that we were getting points on Houston. But let's shift over to our next segment here, which is the injury watch. And let's start with the Bengals and Vikings. I mean, we can basically do a whole game preview here because there's so much to keep track of. But Cincinnati once again struggled to keep Joe Burrow upright as he was hit on a league high 27% of his dropbacks. And Burrow left the game in the second quarter with a grade 3 turf toe injury and is expected to miss 3 months.
Yeah, Burrow is averaging 0.14 EPA per play the last 3 years. His backup, Jake Browning, since he came into the league 3 years ago, is averaging 0.13 EPA per play. So basically no difference between Joe Burrow and Jake Browning. Kind of hard to believe. I mean, from a data perspective, you're going to have a hard time making a case that Jake Browning is more than a point worse than Joe Burrow. But I think, you know, given Burrow's status, it's likely more than that. I mean, most elite quarterbacks in the NFL are worth around 6 points compared to their backup. So, I mean, I'm going with a 4.5 point downgrade here, but I'm willing to adjust pretty aggressively in either direction as we get more information on Browning. Now, Zach Taylor, he believes in Browning. When Browning was the starter in 2023 from weeks 11 to 18, Zach Taylor called a 63% neutral game pass play rate. That was the fourth highest in the NFL. So Taylor certainly trusts his backup quarterback.
Yeah, looking back at last week, Jacksonville blitzed Browning on 33% of his dropbacks after he came into the game, and he averaged 11.9 yards per pass play, getting the ball out quickly with a time to throw of less than 2 seconds. And Browning is going to see plenty more of those looks as Brian Flores' defense has the fifth highest blitz rate.
And Flores is going to be getting some guys back on that defense. Andrew Van Ginkel, Jeff Okudah, Harrison Smith likely makes his season debut this week. Those three starters are worth 1.4 points by our numbers.
And looking at the Vikings, they also lost their starting quarterback in J.J. McCarthy, who's going to miss 2 to 4 weeks with a high ankle sprain.
So Carson Wentz is going to be under center for Minnesota this week, and he's got a talented supporting cast around him. The offensive prior on the Vikings would have been 23rd, even if you rated Carson Wentz around where Spencer Rattler was coming into the season. Now, Ryan Kelly is going to be out, the starting center, so that, maybe makes them the 26th or 27th best offense, but Wentz is going to be better than what J.J. McCarthy has put on the field thus far. McCarthy is averaging a league low, negative 0.35 EPA per play with a 42% success rate. Wentz, through his career, 0.07 EPA per play with a 47% success rate. And even since he left the Eagles, when he's been bouncing around as a backup, 0.04 EPA per play with a 45% success rate.
Yeah, and Wentz is also going to benefit from Minnesota getting back Christian Darrisaw, who ranked 17th in pass blocking efficiency in his last healthy season in 2023.
Yeah, a reason that McCarthy has been so bad thus far is the offensive line has not been good in front of him. Backup left tackle Justin Skule has surrendered 3 sacks in 2 games, and they will need Darrisaw back this week because he'll line up across from Bengals edge defender Trey Hendrickson, who ranks 7th in pass rushing efficiency.
Well, looking at another starting quarterback that's going to be out, you've got Justin Fields in the concussion protocol, and then they have 3 starters on the Jets defense with edge defender Jermaine Johnson, safety Tony Adams, and nickelback Michael Carter are in the we'll see stage.
Yeah, none of those guys practice on Wednesday on the defense, and then Fields is going to be out. Backup Tyrod Taylor is coming in. Now, you look at it, this is another situation where, from a data standpoint, you can make the argument the backup just as good, if not better. Tyrod Taylor is averaging 0.05 EPA per play more than Justin Fields since 2021 when Fields came into the NFL, and his success rate is 1.2 percentage points higher as well. So, Tyrod Taylor on the back end of his career, he's not going to be playing like he is in his prime. There's maybe a slight downgrade here, but not much there, the gap between Taylor and Fields.
All right, well, looking at the Cardinals, their secondary is in shambles with all 3 starting cornerbacks of Garrett Williams, Max Melton, and Will Johnson likely to miss this game.
Yeah, so we're going to downgrade the Cardinals defense by 2.2 points for that cluster loss. And then on the other side, the 49ers are dealing with injuries of their own. Brock Purdy missed the last game due to turf toe, and Mac Jones was admirable in relief, averaging 6.4 yards per pass play without George Kittle. And then they lost starting left guard Ben Bartz and fullback Kyle Juszczyk during the game. Now, Purdy has a chance to play on Sunday, but right now I'm counting him as out. You might know more about that situation by the time you're watching this video.
All right, well, looking at Tampa Bay, their offensive line ranks 31st in pass blocking efficiency, and Baker Mayfield needs all-pro tackle Tristan Wirfs to make his season debut, but it sounds like he's targeting week 5, but it also sounds like right tackle Luke Gadecki is going to miss time too, and then Buccaneers center Graham Barton has been playing out of position at tackle, and he surrendered 10 pressures, which is the 3rd most in the NFL.
And even more bad news hit Tampa Bay's offensive line on Wednesday night when they announced right guard Cody Mock was out for the season. So now that's their 3 best offensive linemen out for this game. We have that cluster loss worth between 3 and 4 points.
And to add to that, Buccaneers interior defender Kalijah Kancey is going to be out for the rest of the season too.
Yeah, and Kancey ranked 11th in pass rushing efficiency last season. He's worth a half point to our metrics. So just the Buccaneers dealing with injuries everywhere across that team.
Yeah, that is not looking great for them. But let's shift over to stock up, stock down. And whose stock are you buying this week?
Michael Penix. So He's the only quarterback in the NFL right now without a turnover-worthy throw. But we've seen his average depth of target drop from 10.6 last season to 6.9 this year. And I believe his ADOT is down because Atlanta's offensive line has been shaky, ranking 29th in pass blocking efficiency so far. But that weakness is not going to be tested on Sunday because Carolina's defense has the 5th worst pressure rate, and they're going to be without starting defensive tackle Tershawn Wharton again. Backup interior defender Bobby Brown has only a 4% pressure rate.
Yeah, and it looks like the Falcons are finally getting that Kyle Pitts breakout as he is 8th in EPA per target and has a favorable matchup running vertical in the seams as the Panthers are surrendering a league high 0.75 EPA per target to tight ends. But who else are you buying this week?
I'm buying the Browns defense. So the Packers have been worse against man coverage for years due to the lack of route winning ability by their wide receivers. And this weakness is going to be pronounced this week because the Browns lead the NFL with a 57% man coverage rate. I mean, the next highest defense is at 45%. The Packers ranked 28th relatively against man compared to zone so far this season, and they were dead last in 2024.
Yeah, and Green Bay tight end Tucker Kraft caught all 6 of his targets for 124 yards and a touchdown last Thursday, but it looks like he might be contained this week with Cleveland's defense, and they are 7th in EPA per target allowed to opposing tight ends.
Yeah, and so Kraft is, going to be kind of bottled up. We don't like the wide receiver matchups against man. The Packers' rush offense ranks 5th by our numbers, but the Browns are conceding only a 33% rush success rate. That's 6th in the NFL. Cleveland's defense has held opposing running backs to just 73 yards on 35 carries this season.
Yeah, Cleveland's actually been pretty incredible this year, but whose stock are you going to be selling this week?
It's not been a strong start to the season for Bo Nix. I mean, he's putting the ball into harm's way despite ranking last in the league in air yards per attempt. So that's a bad combo. If you're not pushing the ball downfield and you're still, throwing interceptions. I mean, his interception rate has doubled from 2.1% last year to 4.3% this year. And it's not a fluke. He leads the league with an 8.1% turnover-worthy throw rate. And this is not a good matchup for Bo Nix to turn it around. Denver's offense has the 4th highest play action rate, and the Los Angeles defense ranks 3rd relatively versus play action compared to non-play action passes, and they rank 6th in that stat last season. The Broncos, love to get the ball out to running backs on screens. Their running backs have the 8th highest target share this year, but the Chargers rank 1st in receiving success rate allowed to opposing running backs in 2024, and they rank 4th this year.
Yeah, it's looking like another case of the sophomore slumps, but who else are you going to be selling?
I'm selling Saquon Barkley, and it's mostly because I think we're finally going to see a turn with the Eagles offense. So Jalen Hurts averaged 30 pass attempts for his first 3 seasons as a starter. Last year, that dropped to 24, and this year he's all the way down to 22.5 pass attempts per game because Philadelphia's ground game is the best in the NFL by our metrics. But they might have to finally start airing it out this week as the Rams are 3rd in rushing success rate allowed. Hurts had 27 dropbacks against Los Angeles in the playoffs last year. And then Barkley leads all running backs with a 73% receiving success rate this season. But I think he's going to be limited in the screen game because the Rams are allowing a league low negative 1.41 EPA per target to opposing running backs.
All right, well, let's shift over to our next segment here, which is the weather of the week. And what are you seeing out there?
Well, there's really no weather to be concerned about. I mean, maybe a shower could always pop up in Florida at this time of year, but for the most part, we're looking clean across the board. The average total in the betting market right now is 45, and I think it should be more like 46. I wouldn't be surprised if you made money just blind betting overs this Sunday.
I'm sure the public loves to hear that, but let's shift over to our next segment here. We've got the DraftKings Player of the Slate, and last week you had Juwan Johnson, who was priced all the way down at 3,600, and he finished 3rd in tight end PPR scoring. But who are you putting in your lineup this week?
Caleb Williams at 5,600. So Caleb is cheap here considering this game has the highest total on the main slate and he has a good matchup. So Dallas former all-pro cornerback Deron Bland is going to be out again, and the Cowboys are 30th in receiving success rate allowed to opposing wide receivers. And Chicago targets their wide receivers the 7th most in the NFL. Caleb's been struggling for answers against the blitz in this new offense with Ben Johnson, but he's been pretty good against a standard pass rush. And Dallas defensive coordinator Matt Eberflus isn't going to test that weakness against the blitz because Eberflus has had 2 straight seasons with the blitz rate below 30% before he was fired in Chicago. And then the Cowboys have come out this year with an 82% standard pass rush rate. That's 4th highest in the NFL.
I love that one. I got some good faith in Ben Johnson and Caleb there. But let's shift over to our primetime preview. And we've got my Chiefs favored by 6 in New York with a total of 45. And you actually had a release earlier in the week on this game.
Yeah, we sent out strong opinion over 44.5. And you could still bet it at 45, but I wouldn't go much higher than that.
Well, Russell Wilson completed 64% of his deep passes for 264 yards, and it was the most yards to come from passes with 20-plus air yards in the last decade. And the Giants' clear strength here is throwing deep.
And the major weakness for New York's offense has been the left tackles surrendering a 10% pressure rate. But it seems like Andrew Thomas is tracking to make his season debut on Sunday night, fixing that problem. And then the right tackle, Jermaine Elmanor, ranks 7th in pass blocking efficiency. So I think he can hold up against George Karlaftis. And I think Wan'Dale Robinson has a nice matchup on the inside. As you know, I do not think Jamari Conner is a good player. He's the player to attack on the Chiefs defense. And he's come out this season surrendering 1.56 yards per cover snap in the slot so far.
Well, looking at this Chiefs offense, they have been laboring without top 2 wide receivers, Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy. And Patrick Mahomes has averaged a career low 5.9 yards per pass play, but he's making up for it with his legs. Mahomes averaged 20 rushing yards per game prior to this season, but now he's averaging 62 rushing yards per game.
Yeah, and Worthy might come back for this game in some capacity. So if he gets back onto the field, I think the Chiefs can improve on their 11th rated offense in terms of yards per play. You know, Giants' best player on defense is nose tackle Dexter Lawrence, but the Chiefs have one of the best centers in the league, Creed Humphrey. He ranks 4th in pass blocking efficiency. Both of these offenses are top 5 in pass rate over expectations. So this pace is projected to be the 2nd fastest of the week by our metrics. Our model favors the Chiefs by 6.0 with a predicted total of 47.9. And the only reason the over isn't a best bet here is that Kansas City defensive coordinator Steve Spagnuolo might have figured something out in regards to defending Russell Wilson. He's had 5 starts against Spagnuolo in the last few years, and he's averaging just 3.9 yards per pass play in those games.
Well, before we go, let's do our primetime prop. And last week we had to record on Wednesday due to me going on a bachelor trip in Destin. And at that time, Dalton Schultz receiving prop was set at 2.5.
It was, but it moved to 3.5 by the time the podcast was released on Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern. And of course, he finishes with 3 receptions. So we're definitely grading that one as a loss.
All right. Well, that puts you at 25-20 on podcast props dating back to 2023.
This week, I'm taking Marquise Brown over receiving yards. So he's 6th in yards per route run in the slot, and he's got a favorable matchup on the inside this week across from Andrew Phillips, who is one of just 3 qualifying nickelbacks surrendering more than 2 yards per slot cover snap this season. If Xavier Worthy does get on the field this week, I think he's going to be more of a decoy. I certainly don't think they'll be wanting to put him in the slot too often, taking hits over the middle.
Yeah, and the Giants defense is 8th in success rate allowed to tight end, so don't think this is going to be a big Kelsey game, but that will do it for our week 3 preview. And if you're looking for more content, make sure to head over to drbobsports.com where you'll find Tanner's write-ups for the NFL games and Bob's college football analysis. And we'll be back next Friday to preview week 4.